Okay, so my thoughts on Windows 8.1 performance. Basically, I'm not going to say anything about it. The reason for this is because I'm actually going to come out and say that the performance between Windows 8 and Windows 7 is identical, pretty much. The only difference you've got is the startup time and the shutdown time. I'd also like to note that CPU and memory usage is very similar between the two, if not exactly the same. My Windows 7 partition, um, actually before I go into that, I should probably explain the system that I'm actually running this on. So, the actual hardware is an Asus Rampage 3 motherboard with 12 gig Corsair Dominator RAM with a 6 core Black Edition running at 4.4 gigahertz, I think it is actually, which is about 26 gigahertz. So that's the basic system with a GTX Titan on top of that. So that gives you the rough system that I'm actually running on. Both Windows 8 and Windows 7 are running on SSD drives. My Windows 8 partition is actually running on the drive that's in the task manager in front of you right now. It is the Samsung SSD 840 Evo 1TB. And my Windows 7 partition is running on an OZZ Vertex 4. The only difference between them, really, there's a little bit of difference in terms of the megabytes of read and write and bandwidth. Not a lot. I think when I looked at it, it was about 10 megabytes maximum, which is nothing in terms of an SSD. With the actual, with the OZZ drive actually being a bit slower than my Samsung, which is my, so my OZZ is my Windows 7 partition, and my Samsung is my Windows 8 partition. So my Windows 7 partition is actually at a disadvantage in terms of speed of the actual disk, well, solid state memory. But my Samsung is running on a SATA 2 interface, which is basically eSATA, whereas my Windows 7 partition is actually running on a SATA 3. So it kind of cancels each other out there, really. And as I say, there's not a lot of performance difference between the two. When they're actually running, I can't tell the difference between them. And in terms of gaming, I can't tell the difference either. They're exactly the same in terms of gaming. I get just as much good at benchmarks in Windows 7 as I do in Windows 8. Memory consumption is the same, CPU consumption is the same, everything is the same on that front. So, contrary to what quite a few people say, gaming is not a lot better in Windows 8. It's pretty much the same, to be honest with you. So if you're a gamer and you have no real reason to upgrade to Windows 8, you might not really want to at the end of the day. So yes, I mean, in terms of how they run, when they're actually started up, they're both the same. But I will say, in terms of startup, Windows 8 is a hell of a lot faster. In terms of hibernation, in terms of sleeping, in terms of shutting down, Windows 8 has been heavily optimized to make sure, of course, for tablets and whatnot, because Windows 8 is designed to be a operating system that's supposed to cover all platforms, so it's had to be optimized for startup and shutdown to make it very quick in that manner. And on my computer, I don't actually have UEFI installed on my Asus Rampage 3. It is available, but I don't have it, which means that I don't actually have the firmware required for fast boot. But even without that firmware, my, Windows 8 boots up in maybe about 8 seconds. Maybe a little bit less actually. But Windows 7 takes more like 40. And since I never actually physically turn my computer off, or extremely rarely, I always switch it into hibernation instead. Windows 8 starts up consistently fast on hibernation, whereas Windows 7 over time starts to get slower and slower and slower until eventually you can be waiting up to 8 minutes for it to come out of hibernation. But it's worth it. I mean, I prefer Windows 2 in terms of desktop usage and general gaming and stuff and other operating systems. So to me, it's not much of a problem, and I can always shrink the Windows 7 startup time by just restarting my computer. But that would take me having to close applications and save work, which I'm not really prepared to do. So yes, I mean, I'm not going to say anything on terms of, oh, Windows 8 can do this, oh, Windows 7 is this. So I'm not going to make a really long video about this, and this is pretty much all I've got to say about it. I'm not going to go into depth about performance, because they are negligible between the two. So yes, that is my thoughts on performance of Windows 8.